You are listening to the Motherhood Podcast, episode number 52. I'm your host, Emily Carney. We at Motherhood believe that there's no way to be a perfect mom, but many ways to be a good one. Our content is judgment-free within the context of evidence-based research. Justina, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
Well, I'm so excited to have you on. I follow you on Instagram and I've heard you on another podcast, and I just think your story is so incredible and so excited for you to share it with all of the Mothergood listeners. So can we first start off by just telling everyone about yourself, who you are, where you live, and any other background information you want to give?
All right. I'm Justina Kopp. I am 30 years old and I live in a suburb of Minneapolis, Minnesota. Just moved during quarantine, so I'm still adjusting. It's been insane. Some of your listeners might know me because I am the Catholic quad mom. I have quadruplet 4-year-olds, 1 girl and 3 boys: Cora, Raphael, Theodore, and Benedict. And we got a quarantine puppy, so we're very busy over here.
What kind of puppy did you guys get? I'm just curious.
We got a Bernedoodle, a standard Bernedoodle, so she's huge.
Oh, so cute. We have a golden doodle, so another doodle, but
yes.
Those Bernedoodles are cute too.
Yeah, she's a tricolor. She's gorgeous.
So I'd love to just dive into your story of, finding out you were pregnant with quadruplets and just finding out about your journey and everything along the way and everything that happened. So as you already mentioned that you have quadruplets, and how old are they now?
They just turned 4 on the 16th.
Oh, okay. Well, happy birthday to them. That's so exciting. So yeah, I guess just walk us through of how did you get pregnant with quadruplets and what was it like finding out?
Well, for some background here, I have polycystic ovarian syndrome, and just this year, so well after I had the babies, I found out that I also have endometriosis. So I knew that getting pregnant was going to be an interesting journey for me. And so we got married in September of 2015, September 4th, and we got pregnant right away on our honeymoon, and we were thrilled. But then a few weeks after we found out that we were pregnant, we found out that we had lost the baby, and I ended up having a DNC, but my fertility never returned. I was in and out of the doctor for several months there, going in every couple weeks, getting labs checked and everything, and my body just wasn't going, which was sort of unusual because I also I'd lost the pregnancy at 7 weeks. So it didn't make sense that my body wasn't like bouncing back right away. So my doctor decided to put me on Clomid, especially given my background with PCOS. So we tried 3 different dosages of the Clomid, and the third round was the only one that worked, and it really worked. And we caught every egg that went.
Oh my goodness.
So it was so funny because at this appointment where we were doing a follicle scan, it looked like only 2 eggs were going to go. And there were 2 eggs that looked like, well, they probably won't go because they were not as big and whatever. So he very intentionally said, "You're not going to end up with quads or anything." And we laughed. And then a couple weeks later, when I was at my 6-week appointment, we really laughed because there were 4 babies. At first, it only looked like 3. But they went back till I realized that I had missed didn't get a picture of one of the kids. And so I asked if we could go back and get an ultrasound picture of that one. And they checked on that 4th sac, which looked like it was just like a blighted ovum. But nope, That was the ever elusive baby D, now known as Benedict, who has kept us on our toes ever since.
Wow, that is incredible. Now, I don't really normally think of Clomid as a drug that would cause multiples. Is that kind of common? Or, I mean, that's just not the type of fertility treatment that I would expect to produce multiples.
Yeah. Actually, it increases what my doctors told me was that it increases your chance of multiples like fivefold. So like the average woman, your chances of twins is like 1% to 2%, but on Clomid, it goes up to like 10%. So,
Okay.
So even on Clomid, your chances of twins, 10%. Chances of triplets are like 0.3%.
Wow.
And there is no data for quads, but we exist.
Oh,
We're there. So yeah, it was still extremely rare. But here we are.
that's crazy. I just did a quick Google as you were talking too, and you're right. It says your chance of conceiving triplets on Clomid is less than 1%.
Yeah.
So that's just crazy. So how is it getting pregnant or finding out that you were pregnant again after a miscarriage? Because I know that can be pretty difficult as well. I mean, I personally, thankfully, I haven't experienced that, but I pretty much almost all of my friends have at some point in their motherhood journey, and they've told me how it's impacted their motherhood. So how is it, going through that miscarriage and then finding out that you were pregnant again?
Well, so keep in mind that I had like this little baby marriage, that when we found out we were pregnant when we found out we were pregnant again, it was like, I don't know, 6.5 months into our marriage. So, so we're living together for the first time, and we're figuring out all of these things, and we, get that first pregnancy, and we're so excited, and then for that to be taken away so quickly, and especially being Catholic, and my husband has a large family, and a lot of his siblings were married and having kids at the time too. So I was just surrounded by pregnancy. And so I felt sort of robbed. And I didn't really understand, because it was so abstract, like I didn't know what it was like to, grow a baby and deliver that baby and hold my own child. And so losing that first one was it was such an abstract loss. So then to get pregnant again, you're like, okay, well, is that going to happen again? Like, what are the statistics there? Like, will it happen to me again? And I said to my husband so many times, like, I feel like I got robbed of like the innocence and the pure joy. Like there is obviously fear that goes with like being pregnant, where you're like, how am I going to do this? And it's not necessarily like crippling anxiety. Like you're joyful and fearful at the same time. Like those things tend to go like hand in hand when you're pregnant, right?
Right.
And I felt like I didn't have as much of the joy at first there. And then to find out we were having quadruplets, like we laughed for the first 2 days after we found out that there were 4. And then when that third day after, like the panic really set in, because I'm like, okay, well, great. Like our chances of spontaneous loss here are like 40% higher than like in a singleton pregnancy. So then like anxiety, which I'm already prone to, like pregnant or not, was sky high.
Right.
And so, I mean, I still struggle with this now. Like I never had like an ordinary, whatever that is, like motherhood experience with pregnancy, like discerning a second child or any of that. Like I didn't get any of that. But it felt like that first miscarriage really like set us up for all the anxiety that we would feel throughout the pregnancy with the quadruplets.
Right. I can imagine, because you just went from 0 to 4 overnight, and it's not like, when do we want our second and third and baby fourth? They're
evenly spaced 30 seconds apart.
Exactly. That's crazy. And just as you said, if I feel like if I found out I was pregnant with multiples, I mean, especially like 3 or 4, maybe not as much for twins, but I mean, I know it still happens for twins, but especially for 3 or 4, I would be feeling the same way, is one of them going to pass or if you're going to lose it. So I can imagine that. So how was it finding out that you're pregnant with quadruplets? Were you and your husband just shocked, or what was that like?
Yeah. We, like I said, we laughed. It was funny. Like, it was like, of course this would happen to us. And again, it was still so abstract. We didn't know what it was like to bring a baby home. So it was like, we have 4 babies. Like, we didn't know what that meant. We had no idea what any of that meant. So it was funny until, we started sitting on Google and the reality sort of set in, like, okay, like, we just signed a lease on 2-bedroom apartments. That's obviously not going to work. Like, my husband was working in real estate. So we're like, well, I don't really super love the idea of having to like buy our own insurance. So maybe you should get a different job, and like all these like practicality things like set in. But I mean, I would describe those first 48 hours as like pure joy, just pure joy.
That's beautiful. So what was the rest of the pregnancy like? I can imagine that it was probably pretty difficult. I have an acquaintance who had triplets about a year ago, and it was a pretty difficult pregnancy. So how was your pregnancy with multiples?
It was uncomfortable.
Pregnancy is already uncomfortable. With one, I'm pregnant with one. I'm like 38 weeks now, and it's uncomfortable with one. So I can't even imagine.
At the end of my pregnancy, my fundal height was measuring like 52 weeks.
Wow.
So, and I'm not a very large person. I am 5 feet tall. When I got pregnant with the kids, I was 100 pounds. So I am not a big person. And so I ran out of room pretty quickly. And that made me really nervous. Cause I really didn't want like my stature to be like the reason for loss or like super early labor or something. So, I mean, I took so many precautions. I was on progesterone the entirety of the pregnancy. I continued, at my doctor's advice, continued my metformin. It's because of PCOS. I also, at 12 weeks, got a cervical cerclage. I would tell my friends that I had this like ironclad cervix because God bless that organ in my body. She's the real hero of this story. No preterm labor whatsoever, no dilation, no funneling. Wow. She held on. But I mean, yeah, I had the pubis syphilis dysfunction, where like your pubic bone starts to separate.
Oh, right. Yes. Yeah. I had that after my daughter, and I have that now. Yeah. The SPD.
Yep. It's so uncomfortable.
Yes.
And, so stairs and getting in and out of vehicles, which I was going to the doctor, especially at the end, going to the doctor 3 times a week. So those moments were very uncomfortable. But I mean, there's a lot that I do miss from it. The thought of like holding all of them all at once. And cause I can't do that now. I can't hold all of them all at once. They'll squash me, but just to feel like these 4 like distinct individuals, like just growing and moving and developing inside of me was so, gosh, like there's nothing like that. There's absolutely nothing like that. So I really cherished that. And as uncomfortable as it was, like I distinctly remember like lonely moments in my apartment while my husband was at work, just laying on our bed and just setting something down on my stomach, or wearing like a striped shirt or something so I could see them all moving. And just like, I don't know, it was so powerful and so beautiful.
Yeah. Just as you were saying, I didn't really realize before getting pregnant myself how difficult it was to manage. And I mean, we're talking, for me, it's just one baby, so I can't imagine multiplying that by two, but it's really hard, and it takes a big toll on your body, and just as you were saying, the pain and then the difficulty moving and everything, it's pretty real. So what was it like going to your doctor's appointments when you had multiples? Did you feel like the doctors were pretty supportive of you having multiples, or did they ever pressure you into, or did you ever feel pressured to make certain decisions about your pregnancy?
Yeah. So I was going to two different clinics throughout that pregnancy. So, at the start, when we got pregnant, I was going to this like Christian pro-life clinic that's here in the Twin Cities, and so they were super supportive. Obviously, they were my doctor turned like white as a ghost when he saw that there were four, and he was like visibly sweating because he was like, "Oh shoot, like this is a lot." But super supportive, and knew that he had to refer us to a perinatal specialist. So we got our case sort of transferred over to an MFM, and there at 8 weeks, my husband and I walk in. We're excited, a little nervous, but really excited. And we tell the doctor right away, like, we are keeping these babies. Like, my husband said, I want to hear what your plan is for 4 healthy babies and 1 healthy mama. Like, what are we going to do here? And the doctor, smiling, is like, that's really admirable. And a lot of people say that, but then they end up changing their minds. So I'm going to tell you what that would be like and what the risks are. All of the risks that this doctor told us were risks to me, not risks really to the baby. There were hardly any things that were mentioned about the babies. But it was a lot of like, oh, you're going to experience like higher risk of like gestational diabetes, or higher risk of, hypertension or preeclampsia, or all like listing all these things that were going to happen to my body. And the solution was to get rid of 2. Essentially, they recommended reducing, selective reduction was their term, to reduce down to 2. But we already had researched that and had said to her, well, your chances of loss go up, like losing the entire pregnancy, go up if you reduce. And she didn't really have anything to say to that. Also wanted me to get off of progesterone. And so it was so hard because like right from the beginning, it was a battle, where it was at the fall. There were a couple appointments after that where it would come up again, and it was just like, no, I've made my decision here and I'm fine with it. So I need you to be fine with it. And, like, let's do this. Like, it's a challenge. Like, let's dive in. Let's do this. There was one doctor who ended up being the one that did, deliver the babies. We never got along, and she was, I would say, I would dare to use the word abusive in my direction. Just not respectful of my choices. Would raise her voice at me, would tell how frustrated she was with me. And it was because I dared to ask questions. Like, I'm still a first-time mom. Yes, I have 4 babies, but I'm still a first-time mom, and I still have a lot of curiosities. And I'm, this, at that point, a 25-year-old woman who has all of these ideas of and dreams of what I want my delivery and pregnancy to be like. And that's definitely not that birth was nothing like what I thought it was going to be like. And so it was me like trying to like gather like little bits of control here and there so that I could like be an active participant, because what ended up happening was the opposite of active participation in a birth, because I had severe preeclampsia and had to be under general anesthesia for the birth. So I was asleep.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that not my favorite.
Was it via cesarean or?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. But she just was not willing to work with me and was not willing to hear me out, was scolding me. And
wow,
she wasn't even the one who ended up catching my preeclampsia. It was the other clinic, the pro-life clinic, that ended up catching it. And so I mean, it was really frustrating because, I mean, there's all sorts of different factors here. Like, we're the crazy family that decided to keep all 4 of our babies. We're young and naive, and we're, first time parents. I'm Black, like all of these different factors here, feeding into this, where I'm like, which one of these things is it? Like, which one of these things is making you treat me this way? And to be I don't know, like, just, I'm the one that's carrying them. Like, I am part of this. Like, I am part of this team, and they're not exactly, in this case, like, no one that was in that delivery room and none of the doctors that worked with me had ever worked with quadruplets before. Wow. So I'm like, can we just, like, express, like, a tiny bit of humility here, that, like, we're all learning, we're all trying to figure this out. This is new for everyone here. I'm clearly still very salty about that, but I don't know. That was really rough. That was really rough.
I would definitely be too. And it just as you were saying, it seems like it's pretty difficult to find a healthcare provider that supports all of your choices and is very supportive of it, and basically trying to find a solution based on what you have expressed. I know that, I myself had to go through a couple of providers myself, or OBGYNs, just to find, my current one, who's pretty laid back and just basically, it seems like most OBGYNs aren't really supportive of not having any drugs or pain management, I guess, during delivery. Like, most OBGYNs would just prefer if everyone got an epidural, it seems like. Yeah. But my current OBGYN is even supportive of doulas, or, not getting one, and those sorts of things. But it's hard, just as you were saying, to find someone who supports whatever decisions that you personally want to make for your body and your children. I thought it was interesting that you brought up that you're Black, and you're wondering if that was part of the reason you were getting that treatment. I'm just curious what your opinion is on, or what your thoughts are on, the maternal mortality rate for Blacks, because I know that it's so much higher than every single other ethnicity. And I don't understand that. And I'm just curious if you just have an opinion or thoughts as to why that is.
Well, so there's been a lot of this in the news lately. There was a story that just came out this week of a doctor who ended up dying due to complications from childbirth. Wow. And I mean, she's a doctor. She knew the system in and out, and still it failed her. Wow. Those stories, like, oh man, every time I see something like that, I am so very aware of how truly lucky we are to be here. Like, myself and my children, like how lucky we are that we survived it, because the odds were truly stacked against us in so many different ways. There is a very clear issue of implicit bias and systemic racism within the world of medicine, particularly in terms of obstetrics and gynecology. And there's so much that needs to be done there. Educating our doctors and providers and like nursing staff, everyone in the room needs to recognize their biases. And it's all about, are we going to include mothers in on this? Like, we're part of this too. Like, we are an active part of this team. Like, to think of, like, the doctors, the nurses, and the mother, like, we're all working together here for this, like, good outcome. We're all, like, rooting for this baby to, like, make it. So I don't know. It's about, like, listening to mothers, like, not dismissing their pain. That's another thing. Like, Black women, their pain gets dismissed at, like, these like astronomical rates compared to women and men of other races. And it's like, we need to believe Black women. Right. We need to believe Black women when they say, here's a problem. Getting preeclampsia. My mom had preeclampsia with me. And I was an emergency C-section because of it. And so, and my mother is Black. My mother is Kenyan. Like, it's that's so scary. like the genetic component of that, but there's also like just negligence that goes into that too, that like we're not believing women, we're not paying attention to these signs, we're dismissing things that we really shouldn't be dismissing. I don't know, lead with empathy, and give people the benefit that, like, believe them. What's the worst that could happen? Like, believe this mother when she says, I don't feel good. I have a crazy bad headache. My feet are swollen. Like, listen to her.
Mm-hmm. I'm sure you've heard Serena Williams' crazy birth story, which just blows me away because even her at the notoriety that she has and the level of fame even struggled to get adequate health care when she was giving birth to her child. And I forgot exactly what it was. I think she had some sort of like vein clot condition or something, and she knew she was starting to get the symptoms and then notified the providers or nurse or whatnot, and they didn't really believe her. And she's like, no, I know what this condition is. And this is something that I struggle with. Like, this is what I need. Da, da, da. I forgot all the details. Basically she was right. But it's just crazy because she's Serena Williams. So you would think that she wouldn't have that kind of problem. And just as you were saying too, I mean, the prejudice against women in a lot of times the healthcare setting, there's already that kind of prejudice saying, oh, it's all in your head, those sorts of things. I know I personally have experienced that, even being told that my pain was all in my head, even though later it's very clear and obvious that it was not. Right. And then you add in the race factor on top of that. It's just a double whammy. So I don't really know what the solution is for that. But just as you were saying, that as long as people listen and practice some empathy and try to check their biases, then hopefully, something like that will change. So getting back to, your whole journey of having quadruplets. And so you mentioned how you delivered them and then all of that. So how was it having 4 babies and newborns all at once?
It was wild. So they rocked their time in the hospital. They were incredible. There was never a moment where we were scared or got bad news, and like it was crazy. I still can't really believe it. It was wild. They got out of the NICU after they were born on a Sunday, and they were in the special care nursery by Wednesday, and they all came home at 3 weeks old. So they all came home on the same day, which I am actually very grateful for, because I think I love my kids very dearly, but I think it would have been very, very hard to go back and get more. Like if I came home with 2 and it was impossible, I'd be like, you know what? Can you just like keep those ones until they're 18? I'll come and visit on weekends or something. But
exactly.
No, they came home at the same time. And the best thing was that they came home on their schedule. Like they came home with a schedule, which, your ordinary singleton baby does not. So
that is true.
So I really appreciated that. They were very tiny. They came home at 36 weeks gestation. And so they're very sleepy. And so we had to feed them every 3 hours. And in the middle of the night, that meant waking them up. And during the day, it meant waking them up too. But Matt and I had to set so many alarms. Like, okay, I'm going to be awake in an hour and a half because I have to feed these babies. But those first few weeks they're sort of a blur, but they're like there's like a brightness there. Like it was very tough, but it was, we had like a flurry of activity at our house. Like there was always someone helping us. People were so eager to jump in and, bring meals or, wash dishes or do laundry or whatever. Like people were so eager to help. And so I am still so deeply grateful for that. We had postpartum doulas for their whole first year.
Nice.
Came by and helped during the day and then helped at nights too, so we could get some sleep. I don't know. Doulas, man, they're doing the Lord's work. They are I mean, I had a doula in the hospital, and I mean, she was so helpful, advocating for us and advocating for our babies, and just keeping us sane and helping us communicate properly with staff, and then to have that same sort of attention, sort of help us transition into like taking care of these babies at home, with postpartum doulas and helping me with like pumping and, feeding the babies and all of, I don't know. They were so helpful. I don't know how I would have done that entire year without them, with sleep schedules and, they're going through brain leaps and sleep regressions and just all sorts of stuff. We had so much help, and it was honestly the best. It was the best. I miss those little babies.
What exactly do postpartum doulas do? I've heard so many great things about them. I'm just curious because it seems like if you're going to be having multiples, it seems like you definitely should have some.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they are there for you. They're there for the mother, to take care of you and to support you as you take care of your little one. And obviously they can help you with taking care of your little one, but it can be as simple as like, I'm going to make you breakfast, or I'm going to bring you coffee. I'm going to wash your dishes. I'm going to wash all these bottles. We had 32 bottles to wash. And I loved the mornings that doulas would come because then I didn't have to wash them all. And one of the postpartum doulas, she's an incredible cook, and she would make me these like incredible savory breakfasts that were so nutritious. And I don't know, it was also really nice to have like conversation with another adult. And I don't know, they helped me with like paced bottle feeding or sort of hacking sleep schedules and stuff. And trying to figure out, like, there was a time when my son Raphael, I mean, he's still not the greatest sleeper, but when he was an infant, was an impossible sleeper. And so helping us sort of hack that and figure out how can we help him and whatnot. But they genuinely cared about like my well-being and the well-being of my children. And so it sort of felt like it was taking me and like multiplying myself, and having this like extension of myself helping me out